Welcome to Alien Whispers. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Now, let's dive into the story. One second I'm cruising through space lanes. The next, the Zorgon taxi cuts me off so close I can see his smirk. My ship, the Star Chariot, lurches as I slam the retro thrusters, dodging a collision by a hair. My heart's pounding like a pulsar, and I'm gripping the controls so tight my knuckles are white. Won the galaxy's name. I mutter, shaking my head. Howdy, space folks. It's Captain Chuck Starwheel, your favorite galactic taxi driver, with a tail that'll make your thrusters sputter. I was just minding my own business, weaving through the Orion space lanes. Think rush hour on Earth, but with freighters the size of moons and luxury cruisers flashing neon like they own the place. The air's thick with calm chatter, space horns blaring like cosmic whales, and I'm humming an old Earth tune, thinking about my next fare. Then, bam, this Zorgon taxi, all sleek fins and glowing thrusters, slices into my lane like it's auditioning for a stunt show. Zorgons, bless their scaly hearts, drive like they've got a death wish. I swerve hard, my coffee mug sliding across the dashboard, and I'm this close to becoming a smear on his hull. Before I can even curse properly, my comms crackle. Hey, Earthling, learn to drive. A gruff voice sneers, thick with that Zorgon drawl. The ID reads, Zorgon Zoomer. Real original, pal. Learn to drive. I snap back, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You nearly turned me into space confetti. Maybe you should check if those fins come with a brain. He laughs, a sound like gravel in a blender. Can't handle the heat, space cowboy? Stick to your dirt roads back on Earth. Oh, that's it. Nobody calls me slow and gets away with it. Heat. I'll show you heat. You drive like a blind Xeno at a space rodeo. If you're so great, why don't we settle this? There's a pause, and I can almost hear his ego inflating. You're on? Human. Orion Spur, 5 minutes. Let's see if you can keep up. The Orion Spur? That's a death trap of traffic and tight turns, but I'm not backing down. Deal. I growl, a grin creeping across my face. But when I win, you're buying me a drink. The comms go dead, and I'm left staring at the Star Chariot's blinking dashboard. Did I just agree to race through the galaxy's worst traffic jam? Yup, but that's life out here. Never a dull moment when you're Chuck Starwheel, taxi driver extraordinaire. Time to prep my ship and show this Zorgon what a real pilot can do. The Zorgon's taunt still echoed in my ears, his gravelly voice daring me to race through the Orion Spur. I'd accepted the challenge, and now it was time to back up my big talk. My heart thumped like a misfiring thruster as I sat in the Star Chariot's cockpit, staring at the blinking dashboard. The Orion Spur wasn't just a busy space lane. It was a chaotic gauntlet of freighters, asteroids, and patrol ships, and racing there was as illegal as smuggling contraband past a galactic customs droid. If traffic control caught me, I'd be kissing my taxi license goodbye, or worse, spending a month in a detention cell. But backing down wasn't an option. Not when that scaly hotshot thought he could outdrive me. I shook off the nerves and got to work. All right, Betty, I said to my ship's AI, let's make sure the Star Chariot's ready to dance. I flipped open the diagnostic panel, my fingers flying over the controls like a pianist on a bender. Engine status. Nominal, Betty reported in her monotone drawl. Good start, I muttered, moving to the next system. Shields at 95% efficiency, she replied. I frowned. Not perfect, but it'll have to do. I jotted a mental note to calibrate them later, if there was a later. The Spur's tight turns and random debris could test even the best shields, and I wasn't taking chances. Next up was navigation. The Orion Spur was a maze of shipping lanes, asteroid clusters, and patrol routes, all monitored by Galactic Traffic Control's eagle-eye drones. I needed a course that'd give me an edge over Zorgon Zoomer without painting a target on my hull for the law. Betty, pull up the latest traffic patterns for the Spur, I ordered. Accessing Galactic Traffic Control database, Betty said. A holographic map flickered to life, a 3D tangle of color-coded lanes. Red for heavy traffic, green for lighter routes, and a few faint gray lines that caught my eye. Those are the old mining tunnels Max had mentioned, barely used, and off the main grid. Risky, but they could shave precious seconds off my time. I was studying the map when my comms buzzed. It was Max, my old pal and fellow cabbie, who knew every shortcut in the sector. "Chuck, you racing that Zorgon? You got a death wish or what?" His voice was half laugh, half worry. "Crazy's my middle name, Max," I shot back, grinning. "Got any tips for outrunning a lizard with an ego bigger than a gas giant?" Max snorted. "The Spur's a beast, but those mining tunnels might give you a shot. Just watch for rogue drones. They'll zap you faster than you can say impound." And Chuck, racing's banned. Traffic control's got patrols crawling all over. Get caught in your space dust. "I hear ya," I said, my grin fading. "But this Zorgon needs a lesson." "I'll be careful." "Careful ain't your style," Max said. "Don't make me scrape you off an asteroid." "Thanks. Max owe you a space beer." "Make it two," he quipped before signing off. Max's warning about patrols gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside and tweaked my course to include the tunnels. It was a gamble, but I played worse odds. Now, I had to ensure the Star Chariot could handle the strain. I hustled to the engine room, where the hum of the hyperdrive greeted me like an old friend. It was an outdated model, but I'd souped it up myself, and it roared when I flipped the test switch. "Hyperdrive ready," Betty confirmed. I was about to head back when a faint hiss stopped me cold. My gut clenched. A leak? I traced the sound to a hairline puncture in a fuel line, probably from that near collision with the Zorgon. Son of a comet, I growled, my pulse spiking. A full repair would take hours, and I had minutes. I grabbed a roll of space tape, every cabbie's best friend, and slapped on a patch, praying it'd hold under the race's stress. "You better not let me down," I told the pipe, giving it a pat. "It'd do for now, but I'd need a proper fix later." Back in the cockpit, I glanced at the clock. 3 minutes to go. My comms crackled again. "Earthling, you chickening out?" Zorgon's voice dripped with smugness. "Keep dreaming, scale face," I shot back. "I'm just warming up to humiliate you." He laughed, all gravel and menace. "Starting line now. Don't keep me waiting." I gritted my teeth and fired up the engines, the familiar rumble steadying my nerves. But before I could move, Betty piped up with a warning. "Incoming message from Galactic Traffic Control. Due to recent pirate activity, patrol ships are conducting random checks in the Orion Spur. Prepare for possible inspections." I slammed my fist on the console. Perfect timing. Patrols are the last thing I needed. Getting flagged mid-race could mean fines, jail, or a confiscated ship. I had to be invisible out there. "Betty, monitor patrol frequencies and ping me if they get close," I said, my voice tight. "Affirmative, Captain," she replied. That gave me a sliver of reassurance, but the stakes were climbing higher by the second. I pulled up the Galactic Registry to scope out Zorgon's ship. My stomach dropped. His interceptor had aftermarket thrusters and shields that looked military-grade. The Star Chariot was lighter and nimbler, but against that beast, it'd be like a mule racing a thoroughbred. Doubt crept in, whispering memories of a race years back, where I'd pushed too hard and nearly lost everything. My old ship had limped home, half-fried, and I'd sworn never to be that reckless again. But this was different. This was personal. I shook off the memory and focused. I'd outsmarted tougher odds before, and I wasn't about to let some shiny Zorgon rig steal my thunder. I maneuvered the Star Chariot to the starting marker, a glowing beacon in the void. Zorgon's ship loomed nearby, its sleek hull glinting like a predator's scales. My palms were sweaty, but I gripped the controls tighter, feeling the ship's heartbeat through my hands. The comms crackled one last time. "Ready to lose, human?" Zorgon sneered. I flashed a grin, all bravado. "Ready to eat my exhaust, lizard?" The countdown began, each second a hammer on my nerves. The Orion Spur stretched ahead, a neon-lit jungle of danger and glory. I whispered to myself, "All right, Chuck, let's make this one for the books." The starting beacon's green pulse flashed across my windshield, and I slammed the throttle to full. The Star Chariot roared to life, engines screaming as we tore into the Orion Spur's neon-lit chaos. Zorgon's interceptor matched me, its sleek hull glinting like a predator's scales, thrusters blazing blue. The race was on, and my heart pounded like a pulsar gone rogue. This wasn't just about pride. It was about showing that scaly hotshot who ruled these lanes. The Spur was a madhouse, Freighters lumbered like space whales, zippy shuttles darted between lanes, and asteroids spun lazily, ready to smash careless pilots. I weaved through the traffic, my hands glued to the controls, dodging a cargo hauler that loomed like a small moon. Zorgon stayed close, his ship's afterburners flaring as he tried to overtake me on the right. "Not today, lizard," I muttered, banking hard left into the mining tunnels Max had tipped me about. The holographic map flickered on my dashboard, guiding me through the dark, twisting shafts. These old passages were tight, their rocky walls scarred from decades of drills, but they were my ticket to pulling ahead. "Betty, keep that map steady," I ordered, my voice tight, as I threaded the Star Chariot through a narrow gap. Sparks flew as my hull grazed a rock, the ship shuddering but holding. Zorgon's voice crackled over the comms, dripping with scorn. "Hiding in a cave? Human? Pathetic. Keep talking, scaleface," I shot back. "You'll be eating my exhaust soon enough." His interceptor couldn't match my nimble moves in the tunnels. I was gaining ground, the gap widening with every turn. But the Spur didn't play nice. A red light flashed ahead. A galactic traffic control drone, its sensors locking onto me like a hawk spotting prey. "Unauthorized vessel. Cease navigation," it blared, firing a stun bolt that sizzled past my cockpit. "Son of a meteor," I cursed, yanking the controls to dodge. The drone was relentless, its lasers painting my hull. One hit could fry my systems, and I'd be dead in the water. I spotted a side shaft, barely a crack in the wall, uncharted and pitch black. "Betty, plot that passage now," I barked. "Structural integrity unknown," she warned, her monotone infuriatingly calm. "No choice," I snapped, diving into the darkness. The tunnel was a nightmare, so tight my shield scraped rock, sending jolts through the ship. A loud groan echoed as a panel buckled, but I burst out the other side. The drone stuck behind, too big to follow. I was back in a main tunnel, Zorgon nowhere in sight. "Gotcha!" I grinned, but my triumph fizzled fast. A warning screamed. Engine overheat. The tunnels had pushed the Star Chariot too hard. The temperature gauge was deep in the red, and if I didn't cool it down, I'd be a fireball. I spotted a thermal vent ahead, a natural chimney spewing frigid space air. "Betty, open the intakes," I ordered, skimming the vent's edge. Cold air flooded the engines, the gauge dropping just enough to keep me in the game. But the relief was short-lived. Another alarm. Fuel line breach. That damn patch from earlier was giving out. Fuel was leaking, and one spark could turn me into cosmic confetti. "Betty, reroute the lines," I shouted, my pulse hammering. "Rerouting," she said, but the system was sluggish, the leaks spreading. I needed a fix fast. A service hatch loomed ahead, a derelict mining outpost. If I could stop there, I might patch it properly. But Zorgon was back, his interceptor bursting from a parallel tunnel, thrusters blazing. "Thought you'd lost me, human," he sneered, sideswiping me with a grinding crunch. The Star Chariot lurched, sparks flying as I fought to stabilize. "You'll pay for that dent, you overgrown gecko," I roared, but he just laughed, pulling alongside me. He wasn't just racing, he was playing dirty. A low-energy pulse from his ship hit my shields, draining them to 70%. It wasn't enough to knock me out, but it slowed me down, and he surged ahead. I gritted my teeth, scanning for an edge. Then I saw it, a drifting cargo pod, big and slow, clogging the lane. Perfect. I eased back, letting Zorgon think he'd won, then swung behind the pod as he tried to pass. "Come on, hotshot," I muttered, timing it. As Zorgon accelerated to clear the pod, I hit the brakes, letting it drift between us. He swerved to avoid a collision, cursing loud enough to hear over the comms, and I gunned the engines, reclaiming the lead. But the Star Chariot was hurting. The fuel leak was critical, and the engines were coughing like a sick space cow. I needed one last play. Up ahead, a small moonlet glowed faintly, its gravity well just strong enough for a slingshot maneuver. "Betty, calculate a slingshot trajectory around that moonlet," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos. "Trajectory plotted," she replied, a glowing path appearing on my screen. It was a gamble. Too close, and I'd crash. Too far, and I'd lose the boost. But I'd pulled this off before, back when I was young and dumb. Now, I was just dumb. I aligned the ship, feeling the moonlet's pull. Zorgon was closing in again, his ship's nose practically kissing my tail. Time to fly, I whispered, hitting the thrusters at the perfect moment. The Star Chariot whipped around the moonlet, gravity yanking us like a cosmic lasso. G-forces pinned me to the seat, my vision tunneling as the ship rocketed forward. The engine screamed, the fuel line spewing warnings, but I held on, praying my patch would hold. I shot out of the slingshot, moving faster than I'd ever pushed her. Zorgon was still behind, his bulkier ship struggling to match my speed. The finish line, a glowing waypoint in the spur, loomed ahead. But fate loves a twist. A freighter, oblivious to our race, lumbered into my path, its massive hull blocking the lane. "Move, you space whale," I yelled, banking hard. The turn was too sharp, and a sickening crunch echoed as my wing clipped an asteroid fragment. "Structural damage detected," Betty said, as if I couldn't feel the ship shaking. Zorgon saw his chance, pulling level with me. His comms crackled. "Give up, human. Not in my vocabulary." I snapped, spotting a gap between two shuttles. It was tight, but the Star Chariot was built for tight. I dove through, threading the needle as Zorgon hesitated, his ship too wide to follow. The waypoint was mine. I crossed it with a whoop, the beacon flashing green to signal my win. "Eat that, Zorgon!" I shouted, my voice hoarse. But the victory was bittersweet. Smoke poured from the engine bay, and the dashboard lit up like a Christmas tree. "Critical systems failure," Betty intoned. I eased off the throttle, letting the Star Chariot drift. I'd won, but at what cost? My ship was a wreck, and I could already hear Max's lecture about reckless stunts. The waypoint's green flash lit up my cockpit, and I let out a whoop that could have woken a hibernating asteroid. "Eat that, Zorgon!" I hollered, my throat raw from the race's tension. The comms crackled with the Zorgon's low growl, his voice dripping with sour grapes. "You got lucky, human," he spat, but the defeat in his tone was sweeter than a Venusian sugar comet. "Luck," I shot back, grinning like a kid who just swiped the last space cookie. "That was pure skill, Scaleface. Maybe next time you'll think twice before cutting me off." He went silent, probably licking his wounded ego. I leaned back, adrenaline still buzzing like a faulty hyperdrive. I'd won, outsmarted that Zorgon hotshot in the Orion Spur's chaos. But the Star Chariot was paying the price. Smoke curled from the engine bay, and the dashboard glowed red with more warnings than a black hole's event horizon. "Betty, hit me with the damage report," I said, bracing myself. "Engine overheating, fuel line breach, structural damage to starboard wing. Shields at 30%, Betty droned, her monotone making the list sound like a death sentence. "Peachy," I muttered, running a hand through my sweat-soaked hair. "Time to play grease monkey." I grabbed my toolkit and shuffled to the engine room. The ship's hum now a sickly wheeze. The fuel line was the worst offender. That patch I'd slapped on before the race was leaking like a sieve, dribbling precious fuel. A full replacement needed a space dock and credits I didn't have, so I'd have to get creative. I sliced out the damage section with a plasma cutter, swapped in a spare tube from my emergency kit, and wrapped it tight with space tape, every cabbie's best friend. "Hold together, old girl," I whispered, giving the pipe a pat. Next up, the engines. They'd taken a beating in those mining tunnels, clogged with dust and debris. I flushed the cooling system with a solvent, watching the temperature gauge creep back to green. It wasn't perfect, but it'd keep us from turning into a fireball. The starboard wing was a mess, crumpled from that asteroid hit. A proper fix was out of the question, but I could make it space-worthy. I smeared quick-setting foam over the cracks, layering on more space tape for good measure. It looked like a kid's art project, but it'd hold until I hit a repair bay. Sweat dripped down my back as I worked, but I couldn't stop grinning. That race, dodging drones, outsmarting Zorgon with the cargo pod, pulling that slingshot around the moonlet. It was the kind of thrill that made this job worth it. Sure, I could be hauling cargo or punching numbers planetside, but out here I was free, living on my terms. With the major fixes done, I climbed back to the cockpit and fired up the engines. They purred like a contented space cat, and I let out a relieved sigh. "You're tougher than a neutron star, Betty," I said, patting the console. "Compliments noted," Betty replied, and I'd swear she sounded smug. I sank into my pilot's chair, fishing a bottle of space whiskey from my stash. I poured a shot into my coffee mug. Clean glasses are for suckers, and raised it to the stars. To kicking Zorgon, but I toasted, the burn of the whiskey warming my bones. As I sipped, I replayed the race, chuckling at the memory of Zorgon's ship stuck behind that pod. He'd probably be cursing my name all the way to the next sector. Good. Let him stew. Maybe he'd learn some manners before crossing lanes with Captain Chuck Starwheel again. The stars stretched out before me, endless and inviting. I set a course for the nearest spaceport, already itching for the next fare, the next adventure. In this galaxy, there's always another challenge, and I'll be ready, the Star Chariot humming under me, my cowboy hat tipped just right.